Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guests, we'll take a deep dive into topics, challenges, and opportunities facing SAP users today. If you've not already done it, please do subscribe now so you never miss another episode. I'm delighted today to be joined by Jon Gill, Director of Maintenance Go-to-Market at SAP UK and Ireland. And we'll be taking a close look at the question of third-party maintenance. And welcome, Jon. Before we move on to our main topic, I've got a quick question for you. I was recently watching Hancock, a movie with Will Smith in it, and it got me thinking about superpowers. If you could have a superpower, what would it be and why?
And I thought third-party maintenance was going to be the tricky topic today. If I could have a superpower and why? Well, I've got a 4-year-old son, and I think he would never speak to me again if I didn't say my superpower would be, well, to be Spiderman. Is that a superpower? He has an addiction to Spiderman, so I think my superpower would have to be the ability to shoot webs out my hand and swing around like Spider-Man. Otherwise, Joshua would never speak to me again.
Oh, cool. Doing everything a spider can. Like,
Yeah.
when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, you know what, I think I might like to fly a little bit, ease the commute and allow you to get a beautiful aspect of everywhere you go from above. But Spider-Man can't knock it. My
Well,
grandson.
I think I would be shocked if I didn't have Spider-Man in this. I mean, Joshua would never forgive me.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your super response there. Now, you mentioned it earlier, third-party maintenance is often a thorny discussion topic with SAP. But with some organizations seemingly doing well out of it, it would seem that it certainly does have a place in the market. But, what is that place and when should you avoid it? Now, hopefully, this is the questions that we're hoping to answer within this podcast. So, Jon, thanks for agreeing to come on today to talk to me about this. And just to start off with, for our listeners, what is third-party maintenance?
So from my perspective, Craig, third-party maintenance is an alternative to vendor maintenance, to SAP maintenance. So it's typically offered at a lower kind of maintenance line item cost. It's the third-party maintenance on the ERP marketplace, I think for me, originated around 2005. And there's a handful of companies out there now offering third-party support services. Um, they service customers in part kind of relying on software updates and patches that the customer's entitled to prior to terminating their vendor maintenance, and then through developing kind of custom fixes to address issues that arise post the move away from vendor maintenance.
So obviously we're talking about SAP specifically here. So like you say, an alternative to vendor maintenance. So whether you're SAP or the red side of the world, the Oracles, it's another provider coming in to provide that
Yeah,
support for customers.
and I think and specifically the reason I kind of say vendor maintenance, Craig, is obviously there's SAP maintenance in the form of enterprise support, standard support, and there's also our VAR channels for the VAR delivered support. So for me, that will be obviously VAR delivered support backed off onto the vendor backed support. Maybe is a better way of saying it, but obviously. I wanted to be clear. It's not just the SAP direct support. There's obviously it's an alternative to the VAR support as well.
Okay, thank you. And we often see claims from a number of the third-party maintenance providers that they can save customers 50% on their support fees. Can an SAP customer reduce costs on the overall support and maintenance by using one of them?
I think it would be remiss of me, Craig, to say no. The third party maintenance value proposition is a saving in your maintenance costs of that kind of size and scale. For me, the real question though is what do those costs cover? Well, I don't necessarily think it's a straight comparison in terms of the costs of maintenance from SAP and then the cost of maintenance for a third party support provider. Um, for me, what's the impact on you on your business of that saving? Um, is the short term saving worth the potential long term impact and the risk that's brought into your IT landscape as a result of that? So I guess to answer your question, yes, at face value, um, there is a saving available at a line item maintenance cost, but I don't necessarily think it's a straight comparison between the two services.
So when we look at that, so obviously, you mentioned there's risks and engaged in this as a risk if a customer is looking to go down this route. There's also an impact on a customer, and a customer needs to look at, okay, what is the value to me? What is the impact to me and my business going forward? Not just, and I think, and I would say, not just now, but in 1 year, 2 years, 10 years down the line. And
Exactly.
so, where could this be the right option for a customer? And I suppose I appreciate if you don't want to answer this question.
No, I mean, as I say, Craig, I want to be kind of as open and transparent as I can be on this. I don't believe it's right for me to sit here and say there is absolutely no time and place where a third party support provider is right for our customers, because that's just a wonderfully naive way of looking at it from an SAP perspective, in my personal opinion. Um, I think, as we mentioned, what are the risks that are inherent in moving onto a third party provider? What's the short term gain against the long term pain? I guess. From my perspective, if you as a customer have assessed the impact of that decision, both in the short term and the long term, and you've considered both sides of the equation. That's another a big part for me. Is I see a lot of people who will consider one side of the equation, not the other. Um, Consider both sides of the equation, then I guess only you as the customer know your business well enough to make that decision. Um, where if I had to be pushed and say, is there a time and place where I see third party support as a really credible, viable option? I guess if a customer has made that decision that they are maybe not going to invest in an SAP platform moving forward, they've potentially selected or are already implementing an alternative solution to SAP. There's no SAP roadmap. There's minimal risk from the migration perspective onto that new platform. Then I guess the cost savings in the short term for this type of customer could be a viable option. I think for any customers that have a roadmap with SAP in whichever way, shape, or form that may be, short term, long term, whichever it may be. If there is an SAP roadmap for me, then I think there is always a unique value in SAP support, and I think that will always, in the long run, at a TCO level and a vendor relationship level, will always trump the savings you can make in the short term.
Thank you. And yeah, that vendor relationships also something key that you have to bear in mind in these decisions. And in my discussions with a number of our members, a number of different kind of questions came up, and one of them was around solution manager. And the solution manager is a tool used by many customers to manage their SAP landscape. And okay, if I'm a customer and I'm on ECC 6, for instance, I'm utilizing Solution Manager. What's the effect on me, or is there any effect? Should I choose to go to third party maintenance?
It's a great question, Craig, and it's something that I discuss a lot when I'm out meeting customers. So, Solution Manager, as I'm sure most people are aware, or is a software solution that's offered as part of the SAP maintenance agreement. So, as such, if you were to terminate that maintenance agreement, then you're also terminating your usage right of Solution Manager. So, um, yeah, so in short, if you were to terminate your maintenance agreement, you terminate your usage right for Solution Manager. Um, I see a lot of customers, as you mentioned, who are using Solution Manager extensively. So to actually decommission that prior to your support termination is a big deal for a lot of customers, and it has a huge impact. Where I often get to when I'm having discussions like this with customers who are considering their options around support is actually we look at their use of Solution Manager, we look at the value that Solution Manager is bringing to them, and we also then look at where they could potentially use Solution Manager in anger. And a lot of customers, I would say, are using a subset of the functionality of Solution Manager. So actually, where we often end up in some of these conversations is expanding the use of Solution Manager to drive cost savings and value in other ways. Obviously, still maintaining the SAP support relationship.
The UK and Ireland SAP User Group is a not-for-profit membership organisation designed to help you to get the very best out of your SAP investments and make your job easier. Our focus is bringing the whole SAP community together so our members can learn, network and collaborate to improve their organisation, providing an independent channel through which to influence SAP. For more information and a special offer for our podcast listeners, please visit sapusers.org/pod or email support@sapusers.org. Enjoy the rest of the pod.
Okay, thank you. So really, in effect, your customers need to think long and hard about that, the loss of Solution Manager in going down that route. And
Absolutely.
So I mentioned there ECC6, and obviously generally in the main customers on-premise environment. But what are the considerations for customers who perhaps have a hybrid landscape? So say, for instance, they use an ECC on-prem, but they have SuccessFactors, a cloud solution that they're using. What should they be thinking about?
Absolutely, they should be thinking about the impact on their wider landscape, Craig. I think the issue of interoperability is a huge one for any customer who's looking at the option of moving on to a third-party support vendor. And not just, as you mentioned, there's customers who are running in a hybrid environment today, but also any of those customers who want the ability to run in a hybrid environment in the future and potentially look at some of the cloud products we have today or we may have tomorrow. SAP is always looking around the corner for the next acquisition. So it's not just the portfolio today. But I guess what do I really mean by that? It's an easy statement to make. At SAP, we're always developing that rich integration between the on-premise and the cloud solutions, and addressing any issues that arise in that kind of integration. If you're moving away from SAP support, then you're not necessarily entitled to the software updates required to facilitate that integration or that interoperability. What does that mean for you if you're a customer who's off support? Potentially that necessitates a need to introduce non-standard custom code. That in turn can lead to solution stability challenges. And then the costs associated with potentially removing that and replacing that with standard code if you were to return to an SAP landscape in the future. So there's inherent risk in the short term, and then there's also then potential cost and risk in the long term. So that's really to address your point around the hybrid landscape. I think there's also another element to look at there as well, Craig, in as much as the interoperability between the SAP core and any third-party applications that you've got licensed through Adobe. So potentially Adobe, OpenText, Solaris, things like that. Or applications from SAP and non-SAP applications that integrate in. There's also, for example, internet browsers or hardware operating system upgrades. So there's a lot to think about there in terms of the access you get from SAP support into the patches and upgrades and integration there that you wouldn't necessarily get without an SAP support relationship.
Oh, interesting. So another thing to bear in mind is customers really need to look at, what is available for the third-party software that they integrate into their SAP systems as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also the one thing I'd also call out there, Craig, just thinking about it, and since I started at SAP 4 years ago now, and in that kind of 4 years, I've seen enterprise support come on leaps and bounds. If I look at some of the enhancements that they've made in enterprise support, but if I look now, enterprise support is the default support level across the cloud products. So you are looking at one kind of single support offering that goes across your entire SAP landscape, be it cloud or on premise. So that's another thing for me, moving away from potentially an SAP supported on-premise system. You're introducing two different support routes. You're introducing two different support experiences. I don't know what the potential knock-on impact is on SLAs, or if there's a problem that sits between those two systems, how do you identify where the problem lies? So I think there's complexity, there's stability, there's risk introduced in there.
Okay, thank you. And just taking it a step on from a hybrid landscape to a purely cloud landscape. So I kind of assume that if you're pure cloud, then that question of third-party maintenance goes away because everything will be in your subscription.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. So the other thing that obviously is preying on a lot of SAP customers' minds at the moment, and looking at their plans going forward, is the move to S/4HANA. So where does this come into play for customers who are looking to move to S/4HANA?
A great question, because as you know, Craig, S4 is the answer. What's the question? From an SAP perspective. No, flippant comment.
Choked on my water there.
Yeah, there's two ways to look at this. From the kind of bottom line costs of moving to an S4 landscape, if you're not on support, there is a definite impact. But also the process of moving from where you are today onto an S4 platform under a supported environment is going to be far, far simpler and ultimately more cost effective. Regardless of your current support usage and how you're leveraging enterprise support or standard support today, if you're intending as a customer to move to S4 at any point in the future, the advantage of the access to the commercial incentives, so the credits that you have available to move from an existing ECC landscape to an S4 landscape, or to leverage the new Rise with SAP offering that we've recently launched. Those things are all kind of inherently based upon you being an SAP supported customer. So there's huge commercial advantages there, as well as the access to the tools and the resources that optimize that move and that the planning and implementation of that S4 program. I don't want to get too deep into the technical tool side of it, but I think if you're a customer today and you're starting out on that S4 journey and you're kind of coming to this saying, right, where do I start? It can be a huge program of work, and it can be quite daunting to kind of start that program off. And I see a lot of customers who say, it's taking that first step on the S4 journey is the hardest step. So the tools that we have as SAP under the support programs available to those customers are going to be hugely valuable to those customers throughout the entire process. Probably the most relevant for me is the value map, the S4 value maps that we have. And if any customers out there who haven't looked into the value maps they have under enterprise support, then I'd highly recommend that they go and have a look at those. The access they give to the specific topic materials, as well as the kind of tools and training from SAP, all centralized under one objective-based platform. It's fantastic. So if you're an SAP user and you're looking at moving to your S4 landscape, the S4 value map is absolutely the first place I'd start. And it will take you through from the very start of the discovery phase and looking at why S4, what S4 can bring for you as a customer, all the different deployment options we've got, and all the different offerings available. And it'll take you right through the preparation phase, the exploration phase, into the realize, deploy, run phase. There's a completely guided map for you with all the relevant CQCs and continuous quality checks and value services under support that are there to support you in every single step of the journey. So those things are all available under your support and your maintenance contract. Maybe not necessarily traditional break fix maintenance, but they're hugely valuable to any customer who's looking to go on an S4 journey and on that migration to the new platform. I guess for me, doing that with the vendor by your side is absolutely the right way to go.
Mm-hmm. Just kind of having that angel on your shoulder as you go on your journey through and helping you through that process. So that is kind of, quite a strong message for those looking to go to S4. But what if I'm a customer that's thinking, well, you know what, I'm happy where I am. I'm happy with the system. It works. What if I'm not looking to go to S4 at this present time, or in the next few years?
Yeah, I think absolutely great. There's a number of customers who will fit that exact model, and that will resonate with them. Those customers, for me, they still have a system that will I'm very certain be fairly business critical to them, and it'll be a very important system to them running their business. That system needs to be stable and it needs to be supported, but it also needs to be optimized. And for me, you're not going to just look at that system and say, I'm almost going to freeze it at a point in time. You're going to still want to be innovating on that system. You're still going to want to driving value out of that system and optimizing that system. So absolutely, within enterprise support, there are a number of tools that are available for the ECC landscape to look at how we can drive benefits and cost reductions and process improvements. The tools like the Pathfinder tool will be the obvious place to start. So look at where customers can really drive value. So I think that's one thing I would say is if you are not looking at moving to S4 in the short term, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't want to drive value out of your existing system. And the other thing would be, from an SAP perspective, I'd love to sit down with those customers and say, okay, you're maybe not looking to move to S4, but are you not looking to move to S4 because you don't quite understand it well enough? You don't understand what's involved. A lot of the customers that I've spoken to, and I think the IDC white paper that we released a couple of weeks back has some very good case studies in it, where we've spoken to customers who've been looking at third-party support, and they've been looking at their options because they were in exactly this boat where they said they didn't think S4 was right at this point in time. And when we've engaged and when we've gone through things like the value map I mentioned, and we've gone through things like the S4 adoption starter program, those customers have actually looked at S4 in a different light and said, actually, maybe I need to review my decision, and maybe I do need to think S4 could actually have a place for me in a shorter time frame than I initially thought. So I think there's two answers. So maybe a slightly long-winded way of answering. I think there's two answers. Number one would be you still don't want to give up on optimizing and improving what you've got, and number two would be let's use some of those tools that we've got available to say, have you made the right decision on S4 with all the facts, and could it be that we could show you how it can benefit you maybe sooner than you think.
Okay, thank you for that. Quite interesting point. I'll have to have a look at that paper. I don't think it's come across. I've come across that as yet. I'll certainly look at that now. But one of the things that I've seen is that a number of our members, a very small number, I will say, have moved to third-party maintenance over the past years. But I also have to say on the back of that the vast majority of them come back to SAP. Almost all of them I've seen in that time return to SAP. And, that's kind of a good positive, I suppose, testament to SAP. But on the other side of that, and I asked you earlier, when is the right time for a customer to look at third party? On the flip side of that, what this perhaps shows is sometimes it isn't the right option. So when isn't it the right option, and why should customers stay on SAP Support?
I think it's a great question. There's a lot of ways to look at it. I think that the simplest way is as I mentioned before, the customers who maybe don't have any kind of SAP roadmap, this may be third-party maintenance may be an option for them. the majority of customers that personally I've spoken to have moved away, and as you mentioned, have come back because they've looked at the options and they said, actually, no, our future is with SAP, and if we want to continue to innovate and if we want to transform our business and stay competitive, we need to be on a platform that allows for innovation and agility, and we want to look at how we move forward with SAP. You then compare that with the kind of cost of rip and replace and taking out an SAP platform and replacing it with another vendor's platform. Those costs are huge. So actually, the realization that they do have an SAP roadmap and they do want to stay with SAP and move to S4 or to bring in some of those other cloud products and move to a more expanded SAP footprint has led them to come back. I'd say that's the majority of customers I've spoken to. There are customers who have come back for more maybe tactical reasons. For example, the interoperability that we talked about before. They've moved to the third party with a view that wouldn't be as big a problem, and they've found out that actually there is a problem there with the interoperability and the kind of non-standard customization that's brought in, and therefore, as we mentioned earlier, the stability and the risk that's brought into their environment. So we've seen some customers who've come back for that, and I guess the key one I'd see is customers who've come back because of concerns around security and the ability to access kind of security patches, particularly those in regulated industries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, I mean, we've covered quite a bit there on obviously, when perhaps it could be the right option for a customer, reasons why not, and looking at the future and obviously how that pans out for you and your company. And yeah, Jon, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and for your honesty of what can be seen as a tricky discussion for an employee of SAP. So thank you very much for that.
No problem. I really appreciate, Craig. I really appreciate the time and the ability to have this conversation. I think the only thing I would like to say to anyone who's going to listen to this is, from my perspective, we don't want any of our customers to move away from SAP, and I'd welcome the opportunity to talk to any of the members who are considering this in more detail. My team isn't a sales team. My team's here to help customers drive value out of the relationships that they have with SAP, out of their maintenance relationships, and help them to consume and adopt the stuff that we have in maintenance. So absolutely, I'd welcome the conversation with any of the members who would like to know more or just discuss this in more detail relevant to their specific requirements.
Thank you. So if you are listening to this and are thinking about it, do get in touch with us, the user group, and we'll put you in contact with Jon to have those discussions. And I think just one final point from me is that, whilst third-party maintenance can bring some benefits, you should also consider the impact of future relationships with SAP. We mentioned this earlier on in our discussion. Also think about the loss of internal SAP skills and the potential business disruption of not being able to add additional SAP products into your environment. All different things on top of what we've been talking about today that you really should bear in mind when thinking about this. So thank you, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it valuable. Do get in contact with us if you want to make contact with Jon by emailing support@sapusers.org. And until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and keep washing your hands.